Good morning, everybody. We are back with the Sunday Spectacular Super Sunday Lives. We will go round and introduce everyone. We'll start with Helen Chorley, who is an angel investor, all-round superstar, TV celebrity, co-founder of Property Sisters, an all-round superhuman being. We have Adam Lawrence, who is a big-time property portfolio landlord, co-founder of Partners in Property, all-round, generally amazing person, big brain of Britain, blah, 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 amazing stuff. We then follow on to Mr. Ross Harper. A lot of the stuff that Ross does, we've signed NDAs and NCAs, so we can't really talk much about it, apart from the fact that he is a surveyor by training and trade, has an auction company, a construction company, does amazing things, and is just, generally speaking, a super level human being. We then have Mr. Piotr Ruzanek, business partner of mine, both co-wrote, authored, and produced, published, whatever you want to call it, Before the Hammer Falls, Auction Buyer's Guide. We also trade properties, have done for many years, and we do loads of other things. I can't even think off the top of my head. Piotr is definitely the normal one of the bunch. I'm the loud, Larry one that spends all the money. So that's us introduced for those who have joined us recently or just started watching or just forgot who we were, because, you know, none of us are really that memorable if you think about it. Our subject for today, or subjects for today, and expect deviation and a whole host of rambling, because that's what we're about. We're going to be talking about leadership within your business, within life in general. And then we're going to touch on cryptocurrencies. There's been a lot of news going about recently. And for those who haven't read Adam Lawrence's fantastic Sunday supplement, it is a must read. It is a must read. It is a must read. And in there, he did flag up someone fairly well known within property circles online has reported they've lost in the tune of six figures. Some crypto. I think I think it was something like being hacked or something like that. And that was fairly recently. And a friend to all of us had a similar thing maybe a year ago, 18 months ago, and had, I think, maybe even quite a bit more than that go walkies. So we're going to be talking about those things in general. So who wants to kick us off on either point?
Well, we can start with the end in mind and go on to the crypto, because it's been such a big topic, I think. And you know, we've seen, as you say, we've seen lots of tales of woe this week, and then a lot of people buttoning their lip, which is understandable. And I think a few people probably staying quiet and not crystallising losses right now, unless there's a taxation reason to do it, especially as we're in January. You know, people are thinking like that as well. And you know, it's certainly the consolidation that we talked about, Helen, when we spoke about it a few weeks ago, looks to perhaps be the start of that occurring, maybe. You know,
are you talking about consolidation of everything or just crypto?
Just crypto, really, at the moment. But I mean, I can't pretend to understand why and how crypto has impacted on gold in quite the way it has. But I think there's been some crossover. And there could well be something that, you know, gold is looking as strong as it's looked at the moment in terms of its positioning for a bull run upwards. And actually, if you Google, you know, gold price, top gold price and things like that, it's not dissimilar what you read from some people as to what you can read on top price of Bitcoin. It wasn't long ago people were predicting 100K, 200K Bitcoin this year, and Bitcoin would go to $1 million. But you can find people who think gold could go to $50,000, which should obviously be more significant and have more ramifications than crypto. So there's clearly some kind of correlation that's going on that none of us can quite yet really claim to fully understand. And perhaps if you do understand it, you're trading it, keeping it quiet, and you know, perhaps making a lot of money out of it. So I think there's got to be some contagion. And look, you know, it's not like the Nasdaq's not 10% plus off the top of where it was weeks ago. It's not like the S&P hasn't blown off some of its steam as well. So, you know, this is one of those. It looks like a risk-off situation, and in theory, you know, in the old days, rather than people thinking, oh, if people are getting out of stocks and bonds, they'll get into crypto. a real risk-off situation like a 2008 risk-off, everything goes down at the same time.
Yeah.
This is where your correlations kind of tend to screw, and that's why you did have a bit of gold in the portfolio as an insurance hedge, but it doesn't mean that everything can't go down. And I think there's going to be some concerns as well over. I mean, Fed's looking pretty serious about its fiscal tightening, depending on who you read, and none of us can say. It's a bit like when you get asked for source of funds when you do a deal, and they say if you try to pass one of my accounts over, let's say, and you say, well, there's money in there, and so right, where's the money come from? And you say, well, I sold that asset there, and that's where it came in. Yeah, but since then you spent it on this, and this, or some of it, and then this, and this has come in. It's like, yeah, quite active. So that does happen. So where do we stop with this? Do we go back to I once worked behind the bar for £3.63 an hour, and then I saved a bit of money, and then it turned into something. I mean, it just doesn't necessarily stack up. So it doesn't necessarily follow that money comes out of this and into this. It does when they're rebalancing, and you often see that at the beginning of the year, and that actually was the mischaracterization, I think, of what's going on in the stock market at the moment. At the beginning of this year, was people saying, "Oh, it's just a bit of rotation out of the big stocks, out of the big tech stocks and things." But there's been all these, the only explanation that I've seen to justify the stock market valuations that's held any water over the last 12 months, and it's been going up loads in the background. I've said a million times, the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent, right? So it's been going up and up when it really shouldn't have been going up. The stock market had the best year last year since 1995 in America, if you can get your head around that, which is unbelievable. To have a best in 30-year period is insane on the back of a pandemic and the after effects that we're going to need to deal with, but that's what happened. And now it's time for maybe a bit of risk off. And the only explanation I saw that held water was, well, look, interest rates are so low that companies can borrow so cheaply and they're getting better leverage returns, and all of that is fine until it looks like interest rates are going to go up, which the world has kind of got into, although the bond market is still kind of saying, nah, not really up, really, is it? And of course, the Fed I said this today in the supplement, the Fed want to unwind the QE because the states do not hold a happy position in holding their own government bonds, the Federal Reserve owning the government bonds. In the UK, it's kind of like, well, can we just stop talking about it, please? Because we own so many of them, then let's just sort of keep it quiet. And look, we can always point to Japan and say, well, they own more, and they've owned more for years and years. So it's fine. We're basically like Japan, which we do have a lot of similarities, and we are, we get away with murder in a way because we borrow money so cheap, apart from anything else in the international community. But that's a meander around that topic. But the other thing I'd like to say before I review my 84% contractual agreement is I think it's really sad that some people take the opportunity here to wallow or to enjoy the people's pain in a situation like this, because there will be pain and there will be fallout from that, and that's not cool. And I think if that's happening, and I think you should call it out, to be honest with you. I think you should ask those people the difficult question of what is it inside your personality that gives you pleasure when you see other people suffering pain that have got nothing to do with you.
Well, I think that goes really well with that. Like one of the things for today is that, which is the leadership, right? And what we're creating by actions like this, and especially with the markets when things go up so much, like what that drives, and then when things go down, what kind of it shows in some people that you couldn't possibly see it when things were going up. And yeah, I think
that's really fair. And I think I said at the beginning of the pandemic, in a situation like that, you'll see the best of people, you'll see the worst of people. And like you say, while everything's going up and everyone's friends and everything's all good, you see what goes on. And then when the doo-doo hits the fan, that's when you really find out about character and integrity and all of these things that people say are their values, which I've ranted about many times before. You actually get to see the real them in situations like this, and extend a hand out and give people a bit of comfort rather than enjoying their suffering. I think would be the best piece of advice. And it is, you're right, Piotr. It is leadership. It is leadership. in an organisation or a group that's nothing to do with you potentially. But if it's all about leadership. To me, is about mindset, and distinctly divorced from management, which I believe I'm utterly horrible at, generally speaking. And in many ways, if you do what you say you're going to do on that front, leadership comes easy, management comes difficultly, unless you're incredibly good at selecting people that don't need much management, which is, I think maybe Ross could say a few things on that front, because he's a far better people selector than I am, I think, really.
Yeah, but for me, ending up with some good people has been like throwing darts at a dartboard. You start off with 100 darts and you're left with 2 that are on the board, and the other 98 have caused grief. So, or whatever it happens to be, it's selecting people I find is really hard, but I've had to do it because I didn't want to run the individual businesses, because I'm not very good at doing that. But probably the leadership thing and management thing is probably for me, it's probably the least understood part of being in a business, and it's that bit of knowing when to get out of doing one bit and into the other. The other bit I put on it is ownership. I'm wanting to be an owner of businesses. I don't want to be running the businesses. I'm good at thinking it up. I'm good at starting it. I'm not very good at the rest of it. So you're looking for people. 2 of the guys that I work closely with are both completely different characters, but they're both really good leaders. They're really good at organising. One's a really good manager, the other not so good. But you can see that people follow them and want to do things for them. But I sit above them, I suppose, in terms of ownership. But the reality of it is, day to day, I don't really want involved, because I tend to get too involved in the minutiae of things and chat about stuff and talk too much.
So there's a distinction there, isn't there, between people management and business management, operational management, process management, whatever you want to call it, that's massive. And people can be great managers but be great at one and crap at the other, or vice versa, really. You rarely find people who are brilliant at both. And of course, in many ways, with your position, they have to manage you to an extent, Ross, I suppose. That's the other thing, isn't it?
I would say that's their toughest task on a day-to-day basis. As you well know, Adam, when I saw my email this morning, just bumping this up the list. My daily email from Adam, bumping the one from yesterday back up the list.
I like to think of my style as aggressive, passive-aggressive. I think that's what it's.
I think to be honest, it's just aggressive, so don't worry about it.
Effective, though. Sounds like it works.
Well, I read it. It still hasn't been actioned.
It is Sunday, so that's allowed. That's allowed.
I'm blaming Firefox.
Very good.
So I think it's been interesting, because historically I didn't get any real training in how to manage people or how to do things. So when I set up my own businesses, I'd come through a kind of the management processes and the estate agents with Countrywide Group didn't really at that time give you many skills other than how to get houses on or how to sell houses. And it was interesting. You start your own business, maybe as I did, property trading, and it was really easy to do to begin with, because you're doing it yourself. So you're only managing your own routines, you're only managing your own stuff, and you knew what direction you were going in. You were trying to buy low, sell high, and have tradespeople in the middle. And to begin with, the tradespeople were easy to deal with because there was only one house, and although they let you down, you got used to how to deal with it all. The problem is, as you start to scale, and that has been my problem with everything, has been the frailties of that background. Made it really hard to scale a sizable business. And you see now lots and lots of people who are coming into the trading world, and they do one house, they do 2 houses, but then they get caught up both with the finances, because nobody's really financially all that well educated, I've noticed. So the finances are one thing, but it's actually the management of the processes is incredibly hard to learn without actually taking something out of or taking somebody out of their comfort zone and taking them and training them. We did for the care home business. We went through a government process, and we joined one of their programs and basically put all the leadership staff in that business, there was about 10 of them, through a complete 12-week training program, and it was all to do with the stuff you guys like, about what colour are you and what's what, you know, are you somebody who thinks about this and should be doing this, or is you somebody, what side of the brain do you use? So I think all one of the 10 people that did it all thought it was tosh to start with, until week 3 when it all suddenly clicked for them. And that business is quite a tough business to run, but the reality of it is they have a common goal, they're all in a team, they all understand the dynamics of their position, and they can all kind of lead forward. They're all going in the same direction. So when things go wrong, they all pull in the same direction. It's lovely to see. It's really, really cool to see. But it was a massive leap of faith by the guy that runs the business to go and do that, because in effect, he thought he was jeopardising himself. I didn't do it because I'm the owner, and I'm like, just go and do it and try it. It'd be great, mate. If it works, it works. It's a cool thing. But the reality of it is, 2 years down the line, some staff have changed because they either didn't fit or they didn't fit at the time, and we had to make changes. It's a really, really slick operation, but that was run by somebody who is a specialist, and she basically ripped everybody apart, got them back to bare bones. It was like creating marines, break them first and then rebuild them all. But she's rebuilt them into a team, so we can't take the credit for that, but we can take the credit for, I suppose, going and actually getting it done.
Definitely. And what about when you then sort of segue into the culture point and how you nurture or create a culture? Or because I'm a believer that if you don't have at least a framework of a plan for that, then one's going to form anyway. So you'd be better off trying to understand it and curate it a little bit and nudge it left and right as and when you need to, rather than sort of let it happen to you. But how did that point fit into all of that, Ross?
So it was quite easy because the business was in its infancy. We didn't have any of the dilemmas of staff for long periods of time, and that's probably, for me now, one of the biggest risks and threats in business is that you have staff for too long. I know that sounds dreadful. A job should be for life, and we were all taught that when we were younger, that get a job and go to work and you'll do well. But the reality of it is that we were quite a young business in an old. But most of our competitors have had staff for 15 and 20 years. So we were able to change quite quickly. So the org chart for the business became very simple to produce and to follow. And as people got promoted into jobs, they were promoted into roles where we knew what they were wanting to do. They were given the tasks that they were good at and should have been able to do. And then there was an organisation around them. But I was going to say that there was the fundamental kind of clever bits behind the scene that got everybody thinking about where they should be and what they should be doing and what job suited what person and who was doing the right things and who wasn't. But the reality of it was the cleverest bit was the paperwork in the background to back all this stuff up. So there was a structure, there were plans, we rewrote contracts, everything was done and changed in a way that almost forced things to happen. The way the board meetings are run, the management meetings, they're all done in a very organised fashion. So, the Tuesday management meeting, the notes are taken for that, they're filled in and they're put up into a system. So there's no paperwork, it's all done online. But then everybody who's coming to the board meeting 2 weeks later, they then have all that information, and then they each have to go through their section and part of it. So everybody knows what everybody's doing, but they're not actually involved in it. They don't, the day-to-day of it, there's not a lot of chat between them in terms of overstepping the mark, but everybody knows where everything is. So it's actually just comes down to all the things I'm not very good at, control and organisation. But the trick for me was getting other people to do it. That to be fair, was the cleverest bit. Wanting to do the business and having the idea was one thing, but then divorcing myself from it. So I'm not involved at all in that business at all. It's an hour a week for me, to be honest, and that makes it much, much easier for me anyway.
Fantastic. I mean, culture for me really sort of comes across into property, depending on what you do in property, quite a lot. But development, it's the culture that you have on building sites is one consideration, and a culture within the team of professional advisors that you've got as well. And you kind of set the scene on most of that stuff. I think it comes into HMO and blocks of flats because one bad apple in the barrel can really upset things, and sometimes has exactly the effect you don't want, and all the good people leave and the bad person stays, or they corrupt a couple of others or whatever. So there's tons and tons of relevance to property, and leadership I think similarly, because again, it's when things go wrong. Let's say, for example, there's a big fire. Sorry to pick that one, but that's when you
Am I
show
getting picked on today?
that's when you show ultimately. But that's when you, to me, anyway, it's when you showed ultimate leadership, because that was the moment that shows, right, it's step up time in a big way, and it's a massive test. But it's a test of, and people around you are sort of floundering and thinking, what next? What does this mean? What's going to happen? And all the rest of it. And, you know, all in one go, you're thrown into A, sort of dealing with the enormity of the incident, B, all those people looking up at you and going, we don't know what to do, Ross. What do we do, basically, you know? And that's a big deal whenever there's a big insurance claim or anything, I think.
Yeah, so I think like these are things you can't plan for, but ultimately probably that showed, and I'm being honest here, weakness on my part in terms of I probably should have had that business structured better, so there were more people could be relied on at the time. But you're right. I think that jeopardised everything I had at the time. So people who were involved in other businesses and who were working all thought, oh no, shit's hit the fan. We're all going to be out of jobs, and that was probably the hardest bit. But that was the same as all the contractors demanded payment. Everybody wanted it to all happen. At the same time, you're like, well, it's like, it can't really happen that way. We've got to try and organise it and make it all happen in a way. But I suppose the other side of it was that kind of culture becomes, because I was quite relaxed about it, I said, well, we've built it once, we'll build it again, we'll fix it, there will be a way around it. And everybody said, well, what's the way around? I'm like, well, we don't know that bit yet, but that's the only bit we don't know. But what I do know is if we sell 20 auction houses this month, we'll have some income that we can pay people. If we do this, if we're doing these other things, that was good. But the culture of the people around me, yourself included, Adam, where they were helpful, they gave support, some gave financial support. That was picked up from organising my life differently, probably 3 or 4 years earlier, which is what we touched on previously about having people around you and that kind of culture. So leadership is one thing, but I think being able to lead things is good. But actually the smartest bit of it is allowing other people to be involved in that process and deal with things for you, because there's only one of you. You've only got 24 work hours in a day. It's not, you can't magic stuff up. So the more people you get that are good at it, the easier the whole process becoans.
I think that highlights the difference between leadership and ownership almost for us, because I don't think you really, I don't think that was you getting through that was a leadership matter. I think it was you being the owner, taking ownership of the situation and allowing the people that were supporting that scenario to lead you out of that situation, which took massive amounts of fortitude and like, God, I can't even imagine. But like, well, you got through it, right? And that's kind of, it's a battle scar. Yeah. Well, yeah, of course. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's interesting. I've been a little bit quiet in this call, just kind of taking on a lot of the points. There's been some phenomenal points, but one thing I wanted to like just wrap back round to, because I think there's been a good question that's been added, is people taking enjoyment out of other people's misery. And my very first mentor, who was a family member, used to say the first people out when others are in pain, it's like the first people are out when the sun's out. It's the reptiles and the snakes, it's the cold-blooded that head to the sun first. They're the first ones out to bask in the pain and hurt of somebody else.
A reptile, Ross?
No, I'm talking about the people that actively, I think we were talking about the losses that people are enduring at the moment in crypto and things like that. The first people out to kind of, it's the cold-blooded almost that come out first to kind of bask in the pain and the hurt of other people. I just wanted to share that little analogy.
So I think that's true, but I think because of social media, and I'm using it, I'm on it a lot more because of where I am just now. So you keep in touch and see what people are doing with things. But I think with social media, lots of people don't comment because things are not going as well for them as they perceive other people to be doing. So it's that natural release when you see somebody who's been crowing about something having gone so well and how much they've made, either not commenting, not pointing things out, or when they're honest and say, look, I've lost this, or this has happened, or that's happened. It's a very quick release then just to write a comment, isn't it? And kind of you're almost releasing the tension of not having made the 32% in Bitcoin last week because somebody else has lost 24% on it. It's vindicating your decision to sit on the fence.
Yeah, there probably is an element of that. But I think going back to the crypto and the Bitcoin and things like that, or any investment, I think it's important to look at the flow of money. And I think a lot of people don't think about the direction that kind of global money moves in, right? Because you can almost predict that when money moves from one place, it has to go to another place. It's like energy, money only increases because they're only ever adding ones and zeros to a computer screen, right? It doesn't actually go anywhere. In financial crashes, all of this money's been wiped off of this spreadsheet, and it's gone somewhere else. So you just have to figure out where that flow is. And I think people, they look for investments in terms of, some people look for it in terms of stability. Some people look at it in terms of, growth or massive growth, and that obviously a factor in risk. And then some people invest because they're told that that's what they should do. A lot of people are told, invest, but don't invest in that, or don't do it like this, or don't do it like that. And that's quite dangerous. But I think if you follow the flow, you tend to have a really good chance of figuring out, what's going on. I mean, at the moment, I think an interesting flow, bringing it round to property, is actually a lot of people have been holding on to their assets. The number of sales the last 2 years have gone down, give or take. And then that makes you think, well, where is the money gone? Well, a lot of people have changed their bathrooms or their kitchens, or done that extension they've always been thinking about, or whatever it is. So that the flow of money hasn't gone to one direction to another, but a lot of people are busy. A lot of people, the money moves in different ways. And I think especially in crypto and like the metaverse and all that stuff, or internet version 3 or whatever they're calling it, there's money flowing into that. And that's really very interesting. I think I read that the former head of Google kind of obviously left Google and then invested like 250 billion into a certain type of metaverse crypto coin or something like that. And you think, well, if someone like that is going balls deep into a specific coin, and we're not talking about a spread, but a specific coin, it does make you think, where is the actual flow of money coming and going to?
And a step on from that is where or who that flow is coming from. Like actually, Adam mentioned it on the predictions video that we did for the Property Sisters UK YouTube. If you've not seen it, check it out. About with Bezos and was it Elon Musk? Some of the big guys like liquidating stuff at the end, towards the end, I think it was around November time, but towards the end of last year, and liquidating kind of positions, selling off some stock, not just kind of for taxes and whatever, but significant portions. Like you've got to ask, why is that? So then you're getting kind of deeper into levels of watching the flow, who and why, and drawing out. And you don't always get the, your conclusions that you draw right, but it's worth asking those questions for sure.
Because I mean, their kind of money is. Oh, sorry, go on, Ross.
I was just asking, why did you get an answer as to why they were doing that?
Well, Musk hid it in the most beautiful way, didn't he? Because he asked the question on Twitter, "Oh, should I sell some of my stocks?" It was just so clever. I mean, utter genius manipulation of millions of people. I mean, very clever. But ultimately, I think it boils down to the fact that they'd had such a record amount of growth, and it had outstripped. We're starting. We weren't there, but with the FANG stocks, we were starting to get to the point where there's that famous example of Cisco Systems in 1999, where if they carried on growing at the rate they were predicted to, they would have been bigger than the whole US economy by 2064 or something like that. And now, in this day and age, people are making different bets. The bet on Tesla is effectively that Musk will make all these other wonderful businesses and things happen, which is understandable. What I don't get is whether he'd do that under the wrapper of Tesla necessarily, rather than one of his other companies, or start a new company. And that's what I don't understand about the Tesla stock price. Bezos, similarly, that I read something interesting the other day that you could do the same for AWS. They've talked about breaking Amazon up and Amazon Web Services, and AWS would be the sixth biggest company in the world or something like that. Just as interestingly, if they broke off AirPods into their own company because they're so profitable, they would be something like the sixth or seventh biggest company in the world. I mean, can you get your head around just the one product? I mean, that's just incredible, isn't it? So, you know, these things are already being priced in to this incredible extent. And it just, you know, with Amazon, you could make an argument that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, maybe. With Tesla, you've got no chance of making that argument. You're just in theoretical boundaries far beyond what I would speculate on. But obviously, well, it seems to me to be obvious that Bezos, given that he surrendered whatever it was, 6.5% to his ex-wife, you know, and he's a notorious control freak and has been for decades, to sell off any more significant portions could surely only mean he thinks the stock's too expensive or it's time to cash in. Because, you know, these guys have got unlimited lines of credit with personal loans at next to no interest rates. It means tax, and he's not paying tax to try and, you know, make friends with the people. Bezos doesn't care about the people. He's not particularly philanthropic. He's generally, you know, a hard-headed mother crusher, you know. So I think it can only be that he feels the stock price is far too high.
I sense a bit of hero worship there from Adam. Does anybody else see that?
I think those personality type. I think you have to be like that if you're going to be worth $100 billion. So I don't. Well, although Buffett is not the same, but then Buffett's played a different game over a longer time period. So, you know, that's not
careful,
necessarily.
Adam. we can head back into Jordan B. Peterson territory again, talking about outliers on behaviorals and how they get to where they get to, and the disparity between the sexes and races and things like that.
Are you being high in trait neuroticism there, Jay, by bringing that up? Just
I could be dangling a rather seductive carrot for you there by
I like a bit of JBP, as you know, I can go down that rabbit hole all day. But Helen, you have to manage a few, or manage/lead/ be in the pool with some quite interesting characters with some of the stuff you're doing at the moment. So there's an element of, and a real art of leadership, because I'm sure a lot of those people don't really feel they're there to be led by you in any way. But I'm sure you have to do it. Do you want to tell us a bit? I can't remember their names at this point. Those guys they've done some stuff, you know, in that property lift show you're involved in, or whatever it is.
Property Elevator applications open today. Boom,
Yeah.
boom. Yes, no, there's great personalities in those, and there's big personalities in lots of stuff I do. And going back to something like that we opened like the episode with is how those personalities, and not actually those in particular, but I'm thinking of a couple of developers that I have had the unfortunate pleasure of working with, how they work when the stuff hits the fan. And you know, there's somebody that we all know that has been interesting to watch unravel over the past few years, and actually and another one over the past year as well. And it's wow, it's I don't know, I should write a book.
You know what?
It would make an amazing Netflix series.
Leave the country and go to ground seems to be the theme that runs through several of these that I've seen.
Do you not mean leave the hemisphere?
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Quite.
Remember, Helen, if you're going to be writing a book, you know, don't plagiarize. You can't just go on a boat and travel the Balearics and write something wishy-washy. You got to go and do something else. Go and do something else. I don't know, like talk about the importance of centipedes and flip-flops and things like that. You know, something more meaningful.
Exactly. You know, and those two examples are a spectacular example of lack of leadership and
lack of management at the very least, right?
Well, a spectacular lack of management. If you're not, you know, I'm not saying you do need to be there on site. It kind of helps, particularly when there's multiple projects on the go. But yeah, disappearing off and being incommunicado is, you know, as you all know, pushes my buttons big time. It's disrespectful, if nothing else, especially when you're sat on a ton of other people's cash.
It's quite short term as well, isn't it? Realistically, I mean, I think you have to try and by no means am I, a fantastic developer with a huge CV. I'm definitely not, but I try and be quite tactical about where I deploy my time in the impact that it's going to make. So that could be anything from turning up at the old trick, turn up unannounced at 8 o'clock in the morning and wonder why no one's there if you've got an idea that sort of stuff's going on or whatever, or it could be all the way through to everybody knowing that you're holding one specific meeting that might be key to the project. And some people will pick up on that and some people won't, So I think that's the organization. I think I'm forced into being, I'm not a brilliant organizer by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm forced into being quite organized about that stuff because I don't have the time to spare to just sort of kick my heel. Oh, I'm not doing much today, so I'll nip up to the site or something, especially when the site might be 2 or 3 hours away. So it's just not necessarily, and some of that is also about team selection and stuff, isn't it, realistically, like we were talking about earlier.
So I was going to mention that earlier on, that site that we've got that we bought through auction, which is converting a listed building, an old bank building in a market square, lovely old building. But we've got Dan Kennedy doing the work for us on it, and we're in a WhatsApp group with him and various other people. So the communication is really good, but it's utterly spectacular from him. Absolutely superb. He's one of the straightest builders I've ever seen. He's one of the most decent people I've ever seen. Goes above and beyond. And the lovely thing about it, I don't like paying it, although Adam has to do that. But he invoices the guys go and do the work, and you get an invoice a day later. It's not 40 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand. So in effect, they can't have done any more than 24 hours work in a day. And he says, so they've been on site for 6 hours. We agreed. Wow. £3,000. There's your bill for £3,000, and so you're paying it piecemeal, which I think is a bit of a pain in some ways, but it's the cleanest, straightest way that you could ever do, and it's been a breath of fresh air. So I've done hundreds and hundreds of renovations, and he is by far the best builder for doing those things. It's incredible the way he works it. But that then you'd like.
What it also means is you can't hide stuff in there as well, right?
Correct, absolutely. So I bought 11 doors, and that's the bill for 11 doors. It's as simple as that. Really
and it goes down to, here's the number, numbering things on the schedule and then providing photographic evidence that the numbers on the schedule match up to. I mean, it's just superb because, like Ross said, effectively, Ross can see it's pushing the communication out, and he doesn't need to worry about anything. And I need to worry about very little apart from where do I deploy my scarce resource of time in the most effective way, because I'm not needed on stuff like that, which is great. So, that's
so you've then been able to go and organise a grant and chat up the local council to get a grant and to make things easier. So the 2 or 3 hours you spent on site that day with them has paid off to the tune of 30 or 40 grand. It's amazing. But that's because you can trust the system you've got behind to be able to make it work.
Exactly.
And that makes the point really very interesting about time employed to create the biggest impact, right? Because if you are time scarce, then as you say, Adam, you've got to kind of deliver it in such a way where it's going to progress something along to a significant enough degree that enables you to step back and then come back and look at it in a month's time, or it has the biggest amount of impact for you to go, right, there's my 2 penny worth. I'm going to retreat, progress, and when I'm needed again, I can jump back in. And then that enables things to, A, that it's progressing, which is important, but it means that actually you'll feel like you're achieving something with the time that you spent. There's nothing worse than just doing something and at the end going, I don't really know what happened there, which is infuriating, right?
A really good point as well, because apart from anything else, you need those mini wins within a development project to pick you up, because a lot of it sometimes can just be firefighting and can be just you can be left at the top of the organization just dealing with the crap when you're still in the business. That's ultimately what happens. And even Ross will still have that same problem to an extent, but the skill level of the people and the hierarchy of the people and the seniority of the people that are operational means that it's extremely unlikely that will have to happen. And sure, they're more likely to be phoning up for strategic advice because they've already started to address the major problem, and they just would like to bounce that off his big brain, and that's quite, you know, quite an important and quite a nice. James has asked a really good question about when you haven't got retained staff and you're using project professionals versus using permanent staff. I mean, the thing is, James, I think there's a little bit, my take on that as someone who does both of those things would be there's a little bit of better the devil you know, and there's a little bit of grass is greener involved in all of that as well, because, you know, permanent staff, you need permanent things to be able to keep them engaged, keep them happy. You want, again, that strong culture. You want them to feel like they're important and they're well treated, and that's incredibly important. So you've got all of those. You know, when I remember when I worked in a financial services business, and there was this they had this metric that was about what they actually expected people to deliver. And my boss, who was an executive, said to me at the time, she said, "I'm taking a bit of a risk showing you this, but I don't think you're going to abuse this level of knowledge." And it was basically like they said, out of a person, they expected about 0.7 of a job out of them over the course of a year. And that was because holiday and things like that, that's fair enough. But then it was like, well, everyone has an average of 8 days sick. I was like, what? 8 days on average per employee, and you've got thousands of staff? Are you kidding me? You know, that's ridiculous. But it was kind of accepted, and it was kind of, the problem with a big organisation is not necessarily anyone who's got real ownership of that, and then they can just sort of hide behind, oh, well, this is what happens in the industry. Maybe we're not paying people enough. Maybe we're not doing this. Maybe we're not doing that. It's kind of like, I think you're looking at it the wrong way. So, you know, as soon as you have a PAYE payroll, you've got all of those problems, you know, and unless you've got a mega engaged, as back to what Ross said, really, the 100 darts and the 2 still in, and 2 in the bullseye and the rest of them, you know, on the floor. That's what you've got. So it is a sort of be careful what you wish for to an extent. And then you could go back to my, you know, I've wheeled it out a few times. My good friend who's a big developer, who I said to him once, you know, what's the silver bullet for recruiting main contractors and stuff like that? And he said, expect to sue them every time, you know, and you'll never use the same one again. I was like, oh, wow, I was really, I had my hopes for something really good. And it was actually, that's how he goes into those relationships with his eyes open. And that's the.
But I think the contractors also go into the relationship on that basis as well. So they all understand what it is. And the contractor's job in these worlds is to nick as much money off the job as possible. That's what their company's there to do, is to provide you with a quote and then get as much money off the back of it. Whereas I think as a developer, you're looking at it and think, I always think it's a long-term relationship. And I've got a few long-term relationships with subcontractors where I can trust them. I know they're not the cheapest, but I know they also don't rip me off, which is the most important bit of it. So you have a decent relationship there. But I would say on bigger projects, most of the contractors you deal with, you don't have a relationship after it, because their job is purely simply to do stuff. And then you have to look at their management skills, which are generally there around trying to get other jobs. And they're out, so they come and chat to you and chat you up, and yeah, we can do this and we can do that, and we've got our own guys for doing this.
Of course, they do their sales and marketing, don't they? They're their biggest business developer.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. And then so they're away doing that elsewhere, and they don't check what's happened. And one of my recent jobs, and it looks as though it's heading to court just now, and you know, one of the subcontractors came back to ask for more money when the job was finished, and he was a subby to the subby. And I'm like, but how can we have spent all that money on that thing, on that product? And he went, well, they screwed up the electrics 4 times and then didn't get it right, signed it off, and then we did our bit 5 times in total the first time, and then 4 times afterwards. And I'm thinking, all right, so that was hidden in whatever they've done, the time, the hours, the management of it, when they give their monthly or their bi-monthly kind of expenses stuff. You know, it's just wrong. And I was thinking to what Helen was saying earlier, that the 2 people that were kind of skirting about where problems lie and you're having to deal with the challenges, they're not, in my mind. And Adam and I had this chat 2 years ago, probably several times over a period of time when we were at various London events that they were at. And I just said that something doesn't stack up in terms of they're not really developers. It's like they've fallen into property development because it's a way of generating money. And they're really good at standing in front of a screen and persuading people to part with their money. But one in particular hadn't really done any development at all. And the other one hadn't really done any development at all. But still, people were quite happy to to hand them over money on projected figures and a couple of nice CGIs.
Yeah.
And obviously a foreign accent's a good thing as well, isn't it?
Says the Scotsman.
I think we're all together. As far as I knew, we're still all together.
At the moment, yeah, at the moment.
It's
But
it's
hence
difficult. Go on.
the cynicism, well, not the cynicism, but the, you know, take all the social media stuff with a huge pinch of salt. I am massively aware that in saying that, I've become social media all over the place in the last 2 years. But half of that, I have to say, is in a response to particularly those two people. You know, God bless them. I should send them a check, actually, or they've got a lot of my money, because the amount of content they've given me over the past 2 years is, honestly, you pay good money for that.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's the sort of thing you don't really want to be living, isn't it? It's not when you get into these relationships.
It's not fun.
So those people technically are leaders, to my mind, as in they are the people at the front, but they have no idea of what they're doing. They have no one in particular. I just remember listening to the whole chat, and then when she asked for help on the value of something, she said, please don't say the price. I remember the post, which was, I can't understand why this beautiful apartment's not sold in London, but please don't anybody tell me it's the price. And I'm thinking, well, the only thing it can be is the price. That's the only answer. And it shows a level of naivety that the only thing that's wrong with it, you've already said it's beautifully refurbished, you spent way too much money on it, it's fantastic inside, it's the best thing in the market. If it was, I don't know. But then, so the only thing that's left can be the price. You can't do anything else.
Yeah.
Well,
the price,
particular
the fact
person
it was on the wrong floor and there was no lift, drastically reducing the number of people who would, definitely. Oh, Christ! I actually remember Piotr may have messaged. Was that the one? That was the post that you messaged them on, wasn't it? Piotr basically messaged saying, "Look, I'm not going to tell you it's the price, but why don't you put it in auction with a 0 reserve, and then you'll find its true value." And I can't remember if there was ever a response.
No, I
don't think there was.
No, I didn't even expect a response. I knew it was.
One of the two people that we're talking about, actually, I have to say, in the very beginning, I got along with one of them. The other one, I never really, but I got on well with one of them. And there was an event that happened that completely skewed any respect I had for them. That was way before any of this stuff happened. I was invited to a rather lovely luncheon with a couple of the people here, and it was an invite from just we were always going to say yes because the guy who arranged it is just an absolute diamond. And we're sitting there and we're having this unbelievable lunch, and the meal is being paired with wines and sherries and all this kind of shit, and it was a really lovely setting. And the conversation kicked off, and I just remembered I think I was talking to Piotr about something, and I heard the word arbitrage, and I thought, oh, as a trader, you fancy arbitrage because that's the nature of your business, give or take. And my ears pricked up, and I turned around and I was listening to it, and I just saw Adam's face, very roughly the face he's pointing to. That was the face. I mean, there was an incredulity, like it was almost like he was talking to a 3-year-old about how to stack bricks. Like he was like really confused about how this person was giving a definition of arbitrage that wasn't arbitrage. And we were sitting there, and even like the person who was
what was it? Was it theft?
Well, essentially. But I mean, even the person like, and we're talking like just like the person who arranged the whole thing kind of, and isn't the kind of person that would just butt in and say something. Butted in and said something, it kind of ended the conversation. I think we were in silence for about 5 minutes. And I kind of thought, wow, if they haven't got that concept, it really is. It's a very basic concept, and it's a concept that they should be applying, especially in development, because you need arbitrage to see you from purchase to the 18, 24 months down the line, because you don't know what market you're moving into. So if you don't understand arbitrage at the point of purchase, you're fucked 6 ways from Sunday, no matter which way you paint it. And I kind of thought, well, I've never been to these people's developments. I've never done a site walk on anyone's development. I haven't got the time or energy for it. It's normally piss when you come to it in the fairness of time. But the situation was, I kind of heard that and I thought, well, there's ones and twos that don't equal 3 here. God no, I had no idea it would take the jump off the cliff that it took. But it was the one point where I thought you have to sometimes differentiate the personality, not from the person, but from the project. Yeah. And the two people that we're talking about very loosely started off being really big personalities. And then they were like, okay, we're going to do big projects to match our big personalities. But the downside to that is that you can be a big personality and you can do big projects, but if you don't have the fundamentals behind you, it's going to fall down. And the other thing that's going to fall down is if you have a big personality, but you don't have, and we touched on this last week, you don't have, you're not going to follow through with being the person that you say you are, when then that's where it goes wrong. Like, we'll double back round to Ross's example of the church development. If Ross wasn't the person, if he didn't follow through with the person that he set himself out to be, which is, come what may, we're going to make this work, which is what he did. A couple of the people that we're talking about here, the moment the shit hitteth the fan, they disappeared rather sharpish. Which meant that they took no ownership over the issues that had arisen, no ownership over the problem. And I've mentioned this quite a few times, is whether the problem is your fault or not, it's going to be a Sisyphean kind of issue trying to resolve it unless you take ownership of it. Sisyphean, that's got to be one of the best, hasn't it? Completely made that one up.
The winner for today. Field goal.
Finish your point though.
But if you're not gonna take ownership of the problem, whether it's your fault or not, whether material prices go up or whether cost of labor goes up, or you can't get the labor to do unless you say, right, it doesn't matter what external factors are actually taking the effect of those, the resultants of those effects, then you're never going to be able to resolve it. If you can't at the end of the day say, it's my development, it's my problem, I've got all of these people's money sitting behind me trying to make this thing happen. If I don't control this, if I don't take ownership and take responsibility for it, it's going to die a death. And I think that's the problem. I think that's the real problem, because come what may, Ross, and whichever way you roll the dice, it wasn't your fault that it caught fire. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There was nothing but no, be realistic. Like, you as a human person, you're not responsible for that fire, right? And everyone knows that. But if you didn't turn around and say, right, well, there's a fire. You're not running around with bells singing fire, fire, fire. Like, right, okay, shit, there's been a fire. We built it once, using your exact words. We can build the fucker again, which is exactly what you did. But there are people that would just be running around, either on fire or screaming fire. Yeah, because they haven't understood it's happened, right? If they don't take responsibility and go own the fact, you can't hide the fact there's been a fire. I mean, you can Magnolia it as much as you like, but there's a fire.
Yeah. There were 17 fires.
That is leadership, isn't it? Ultimately that is leadership, because as soon as you going back to your mathematical points there, which are very close to my heart, as soon as the aforementioned people go manana, it's time that's going to kill you, because things have got more time to go wrong. Your investors' returns are going to get squashed. Helen's spoken about it before. It's a mathematical fact. As soon as you're putting off, your development's screwed and your investors are screwed.
Yeah, but it's also how you run. Sorry, you go.
No, just the costs don't stop, as you say. If you've got lending, the bank ain't going to say, oh, well, sorry, we'll let you have a little holiday there.
So there was a trick that I learned quite a few years ago, and it's really simple, and it's not in business books or any of these things, which is just own the problem. If you just accept ownership of it, if you own the company, you own the problem. So if it's somebody complaining that the door's knocked them over, or somebody's complaining that a rock's fallen off, you have to deal with it. It's your problem. You might get somebody else to deal with it, but then you don't spend any time dicking about whose fault is it, how's this, who's that. It saves you a whole load of time. And one of the things I wanted to chat about just under this leadership thing, because I'm obviously living in a foreign country just now. I'm in Dubai at the moment. I'm back next week, hopefully. But the reality of it is, it's quite an authoritarian way of working, which from the outside looking in, there's one guy leads Dubai and he makes all the decisions and his word, you have to follow what goes on, but it makes life so much easier. Everybody adheres. It's a very stringent, strict regime in some ways, but it makes a really nice lifestyle to live within, and it's really decent. Now, lots of my friends back home say it must be horrendous there because you can't do certain things. You can't go into certain places, you can't do certain things, you have to follow these rules. I said, yeah, but as soon as you understand the rules, life is so much simpler because nobody jumps outside those things. So his leadership, although authoritarian by our standards, I think is actually utterly spectacular. They changed the 5-day working week a few weeks ago because I think they've come to the conclusion that the rest of the world struggled because it wasn't Monday to Friday here, and so Friday was a holiday, it was a day early, so it's Sunday to Thursday, if you like, and they decided they have to change it, and then so he makes his mind up and then tweets it, and that's it. That's the law changed. Everything. Wow. So you've got all these hundreds of 5-star hotels have to change everything. You've got all these businesses have to change everything, but the reality of it is, in a political system back home, we'd have had 2 years of people backwards and forwards trying to pick points off each other. You've got an opposition party who's trying to pull you out. I'm not saying that having that's a bad thing necessarily, especially at the moment, but the reality of it is life in this kind of society where he leads, controls and manages everything, and you understand what the pros and cons are. If you debate it or you don't fall in line, for me, I would get deported. If you do things wrong, you go to prison. So everybody knows what the rules are, and then 99% of them follow the rules so much easier. Yeah. And it's the same in business, actually. It's one of the things I realised when I was here, and we were thinking about how you change things back home. I think I need to become a wee bit more authoritarian about how we organise the business. That there are really good pros for working in some of the business, but there are going to be downsides. And as opposed to me, who's always been quite lenient, I think it's probably important that people start to see, do really well, it can go really well, don't go really well. Performance management is something that I've always tried to avoid. It's not something I've never thought it particularly good, but I'm now starting to see if it's spun in the right way, there's obvious benefits to being able to do those things in the right way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of people, when they think about places like that in the Middle East, they don't think authoritarian, they think dictatorships, right? Mm-hmm. Because some of the most famous personalities or people that run the countries have been dictators. So it's very difficult for people. They hear authoritarian and they assume dictator. And that's not always the case. So those two kind of forms of governance are very separate and distinct. But they're normally underlined by something else, especially authoritarianism. Sometimes it's through a religious social construct, and they try and run the authoritarianism in line with a religious morality. Sometimes that goes extreme, and then you move into dictatorships and things like that. So it's not always a bad thing. And as you say, there is something definitely infuriating about. I was almost going to say there's something infuriating about democracy, but the reality is when you're dealing with, two sides that are actually not that far apart, but as you say, are just trying to claim points, or when one gets in power, they instantly undo the thing that the other person had done. Then, either setting the country back or pushing it. Like no one really knows. It's a bit of a tug of war, and it doesn't feel like a great deal of progress. And I think someone interrupt me before I say something that's going to get me done for treason.
Can I just have the next 87 minutes, please? Is that okay? Because that is just a fascinating. I think I would love to. Rod has a great take on this whole thing, and I've put a few posts up over the last couple of years, and people have jokingly, or sometimes I think maybe seriously, put Adam for PM and stuff like that. And I'm like, it wouldn't be the right thing to do, but I think Rod would be excellent, and he would position himself as the benevolent dictator. And I could see him doing a pretty good job if he did that. And
would you take the Sunak role then? Would you be like Dean? Penfold.
I'm thinking keys to the safe would be ideal. Penfold probably not the ideal characterisation, but thanks ever so much for that. But in honesty, you know, you've had so many interesting windows into authoritarian versus libertarianism over the last 2 years. It's just been utterly fascinating, and there's lots and lots of things to consider. And you know, you say that about democracy, but if you look at Dalio, is probably the most open about culture and the meritocracy that he's always run at Bridgewater, and there's so much to learn from that meritocracy, which doesn't have room for democracy. If you're better, your vote counts for more. And in business, you can do that a lot more easily than you can with any kind of advanced society. But there'll always be a really interesting, you know, there's this kind of this tendency for, if you just stratify people by income and wealth, then lower portion much more likely to vote Labour, higher portion much more likely to vote Conservative. Interestingly, higher portion again more likely to vote Liberal. I don't know if everybody's aware of that, but that is a data-based fact, quite a considerable fact. And that's why the UK retains its competitive advantage. A cynic who, or perhaps just someone who's having a good experience in a more authoritarian regime like Ross, might say, well, you know, the appearance of freedom, and we could go mega deep into this one based on what's happened over the last couple of years for obvious reasons, but the appearance of freedom versus the actual manifestation of freedom is incredibly different. And you could go full Peterson here, Jay, as well, because you'd be talking about compelled speech and hate speech and where the line is actually within free speech and how strongly you feel about something like that. And I think, to be honest, I know we've done an hour and we should probably knock it on the head, but we could segue into some of that next week if we were happy to do so, Piotr. I think
so. I think it's
the lie of equality, freedom of will, freedom of choice. It's all of that stuff is good fun.
I'm going to get some. I think I'm going to have to start learning stuff for next week.
I'm going to get Epictetus out and get into some Stoic meditation and
Stoicism.
Let's do it.
I think we need to set a leading list for the next week on the WhatsApp group.
And then as a special thing, what we could do is we could all dress up as our favourite dictators and see who we dress up as.
Or our favourite property developers.
That'd be cool. What about our favourite dictator property developers? That'd be cool too.
Wow. Oh.
We just had one request from the Property Sisters YouTube channel. Adam, can you explain arbitrage, please?
Yes.
I can't explain it in the same way I did that day because there was context that was never to be repeated, I don't think. Correct. Really. And I'm glad Jay's memory of it is like that, because I was somewhere between, like, a train had crashed into me and a rabid dog. I think that's the only way you could probably describe me. But effectively, it's a situation whereby, without taking risk, and I think that's probably the key 3 words of this definition, without taking risk, there can be an exchange or a trade situation. So let's say in country A, you can buy apples for 6p, and in country B, you can buy apples for 9. You can sell apples for 9p. Right? There's a 3p lift there. If you can manage the transactional costs, the transportational costs of that, and make a profit, then you know, if the market price of apples is static, and that's the big assumption, that you're going to make a guaranteed profit by buying apples at 6p and selling them at 9p. In a simple way, you could say, you know, when I was a kid at school, if I'd known about Costco, I'd like to think I would have been one going to Costco and buying 72 packs of crisps for 8p each and then selling them at school for 20p each. And that's arbitrage. As long as you don't get high on your own supply, that's arbitrage.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll be back next week with continuing the topics that we started on today, undoubtedly. And the Bitcoin might be 50% up or 50% down. Let's see. I'm sure we won't run out of topics to talk about next week. So thanks everyone.
And apply for Property Elevator.
Yes.
The applications are open with so obviously it's me, it's Ranjan, it's Paul Mahoney, Nicholas Walwork, and who's the other guy?
Jay Howard, is it?
Jay Howard.
Guys, you're not supposed to do that. That's. Wait, we're not live still, are we? Well, that's going to be uncomfortable for a certain Howard to find out he's just been ousted. But worse things have happened live on social media.
Genius.
How
Genius.
do you reply, Helen?
If you go to propertyelevator.tv, really, really simple form on there. Just fill in your details, tell us about the project. You send that off. Somebody, if it looks good enough, somebody will ring you to kind of talk through the details. But please just have a go. Honestly, just have a go. The number of people that have said to me after the past 2 series, really wish I'd had a go. Really wish I'd had a go. And they didn't. Just have a go. Just try, please.
Yeah, and if you don't have deals, you can start looking in auctions and maybe even attend our auction workshop.
Yeah, you've got a month. So the applications only close on the 24th of February. So you have a month.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've got a
they
racing
can
for
come
to
the
sell if somebody
workshop.
wants to develop that.
Perfect. I was looking at that
There we
actually.
go.
That looks really interesting.
There we
It's
go.
really easy. You could just fill it with water and then go fishing. Becomes a fishing pond.
Amazing.
Anyway, my
Really
crowdfunding will start for that shortly.
okay. Have a good Sunday, guys, and see you all next week.
Great stuff, guys.
Sunday.
Bye.